2018.
Your local election headquarters welcomes you to tonight's Tennessee Senate debate. We are broadcasting live from the Baker Center on the University of Tennessee's campus in Knoxville. I'm Katina Rankin, evening anchor for WATN in Memphis, and I will be your guide this evening for the Nexstar Media Group presentation. Let's go right ahead and introduce you to the candidates who are running for U.S. Senate. Former Tennessee Governor Phil Bredesen and Congressman Marsha Blackburn, representing Tennessee's 7th District. And tonight, we are broadcasting live all across the state of Tennessee. We welcome viewers from stations in Memphis, Jackson, Nashville, Chattanooga, Johnson City, Knoxville, and Huntsville, Alabama. Now, let's meet the panel of journalists who will be asking the tough questions tonight. We have Richard Ransom, anchor at WATN in Memphis, Kristen Farley, anchor at WATE in Knoxville, and Bob Mueller, anchor at WKRN in Nashville. Now, here's a quick rundown of tonight's debate rules. There are no opening statements. Candidates will have 30 seconds each for closings. Candidates will get 60 seconds to answer main questions and 30 seconds for rebuttals. If there is a follow-up question, candidates will get 30 seconds, and the sound of a bell, it will ring when the time is up. And be sure to follow the hashtag TN Senate Debate. There you can find all background information on the questions that will be asked tonight, as well as information on the candidates. But now let's get right to the questions. We're going to begin with Bob, who is up first.
Thank you, Katina. Congressman and Governor, thank you for taking part in our debate tonight. Good evening and welcome. I'd like to start with a couple of your stated views on the issue of the allegations and confirmation of Judge Kavanaugh to the U.S. Supreme Court. Governor, you said in Nashville, evidence supporting the sexual assault allegations did not rise to the level of disqualifying Kavanaugh. And Congressman, you told the Times Free Press of Chattanooga the sexual assault allegations were raised by the Democrats as a delay tactic and a smear. Are you both saying you did not believe the accusers, including Christine Blasey Ford, who under oath said 100% it was Brett Kavanaugh who assaulted her? Governor Bredesen, you get the first answer.
Thank you. And I want to say, first of all, thanks to the Baker Center for their hospitality here tonight. The last time I was in this room was several years ago at a forum with two other Tennessee governors, both Republicans, on civility and politics. And Howard Baker was sitting down in the front row. And he stood in so many ways for that, for civility and politics. I'm very hopeful that despite all the negative advertising and so on, we can have that kind of a civil debate tonight. I wanted to take my time with this because I think the obligation of a senator is to consider all the facts and not simply come out ahead of time because of the person's party. I watched it very closely, and finally I just came to the conclusion that all things being equal, I did not think that those allegations rose to the level of disqualification from the Supreme Court.
Thank you, Governor. Okay. Congressman, did you not believe the accusations?
First of all, I want to say thank you to the Baker Center and also to Tennesseans that are watching tonight. We are thinking of those that have friends and family in the pathway of the storm, and we hope that they are going to be safe. Phil, welcome back. I know that he went home to New York to meet with Michael Bloomberg, raise some money, talk about gun control, and could have even talked a little bit about being a running mate in 2020. When it comes to the issue of Judge Kavanaugh, Tennesseans wanted to see Judge Kavanaugh confirmed. Now, if Hillary Clinton, who Phil supported to be president, gave her $33,400, if she had been president, you would not have had a Judge Kavanaugh. And it took Phil a while to make his mind up on this issue, and he finally did. It could have been because of the sexual harassment claims in his administration when he was governor. He actually said that he didn't think men and women...
Governor, you get to respond.
That was possibly the shortest civil debate we've had in a long time. To finish my thought on Judge Kavanaugh, I really believe that it's vitally important that this subject of sexual harassment and so on not be weaponized in the way that it was in this. I thought both parties did not advance the cause at all. I wanted to take my time, came to a decision, and I'm satisfied with it.
Thank you, Governor. Congressman, you get to respond.
Yes, Phil said that he did not think that men and women, when they were in the workplace together, you just had these issues of sexual harassment. I think that is something that is an insult to women who are in the workplace, and maybe he thinks I ought not to be on this stage tonight. But the point is, you need to be certain that judges who are constitutionalist judges like Judge Kavanaugh are going to be there. And if Phil had had his way and Hillary was going to be president, you would not have had these judges.
Thank you, Congressman. Governor, as a follow-up to the Kavanaugh question, you said there was really no politically good answer to this. And some in your party are now criticizing you for supporting Kavanaugh. Your opponent, as you heard, is criticizing you for taking too long and claiming you only came out in support of Kavanaugh after the confirmation was a done deal. If you had to do this again with more information, would there be a different outcome?
Well, if I had to do the process again with what we have, no. I mean, what I wanted to do was to listen to it, to not say, as the congressman did within 20 seconds of him being nominated, that he should be confirmed, to actually have hearings and find out information. Obviously, a lot of stuff came up at the end of that process, and I think we went appropriately. I wish there had been a lot more information, that a real FBI investigation of those charges had been made. That certainly could have changed my mind on the outcome.
Thank you, Governor. Congressman, as a follow-up, on Monday during the swearing-in ceremony, President Trump called the whole process a hoax and said all of the allegations of sexual assault against Justice Kavanaugh were fake statements, horrible statements that were totally untrue. Do you agree with the president?
What we found out through the process with Justice Kavanaugh is that this was pretty much a stunt by the Democrats. The Washington Democrats had said early on that they were going to do everything that they could possibly do in order to be able to block this nomination. And we saw that they did this. This was character assassination. It was a dirty politics. Tennesseans knew that. They wanted to see Justice Kavanaugh confirmed. And I said early on, after reviewing, I would support him. Did you not believe
the allegations?
I'm certain something happened to Dr. Ford at some point in her life.
Thank you, Congressman. Thank
Yes.
you, Governor. Kristen?
All right, Bob, thank you. We're going to continue now with the Kavanaugh line of questioning here. As you know, Dr. Christine Blasey Ford testified that Justice Kavanaugh sexually assaulted her more than 35 years ago when the two were attending high school. If your child or grandchild was in Dr. Ford's shoes, would have you advised him or her to come forward with these allegations? Congressman, we're going to start with you.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things of the Me Too movement, which is a benefit, is that our daughters and our granddaughters know that when they make a complaint, that they are going to be listened to. And like so many women, when you feel the sting of discrimination or discounting or diminishment or condescension or harassment, you just abhor all of that in every single form. And the good thing is that the shame is on the perpetrator now. And you know that is where the shame is going to be placed. And that is a positive. It is not placed on the victim at this point. Now, we know that Phil had issues in his administration. There was a path for Friends of Phil where sexual harassment claims were handled, and there was also the path for everyone else. And what happened? The voices of those women were shredded. They died in that shredder.
Congressman, thank you. Governor, would you advise your child or grandchild to go public with these allegations?
You know, at the today, with the sensitivity that we have to these issues, I certainly would, yes. I certainly also understand that back 30 years ago, the conditions were different and someone might have felt differently. I also understand, remember, my wife is someone who has worked for 30 years with victims of sexual abuse and both women and children. And she's also, I mean, taught me a lot about all the impediments that there are to women coming forward and all the reasons why someone might not step out at that particular point. So I don't consider the fact of someone not coming forward at the time to be an issue at all in that regard. You know, in regard to this, the congressman keeps talking about this stuff in my administration. We had an issue with someone. We got rid of that person the next day. We tried to help the victim every way we could. We do not maintain notes of those because they're public records. The reason we don't maintain notes is to help the victim.
Governor, thank you. Congressman, 30 seconds for rebuttal.
Yes, what we know is that the women probably lost their job, or they were told they could resign. The guys got promoted. The Friends of Phil got promoted. Some of them are probably sitting in the viewing room watching this debate this evening. It is imperative that women know that they're going to be listened to. And as I said, one of the benefits of the Me Too movement is that now our daughters and our granddaughters know that they are going to be heard.
Congressman, thank you. Governor, would you like to respond?
Sure. I mean, Congressman, I can't imagine how you can possibly say that. It does not comport to the facts. The individual who performed these acts was gone the next day from the governor's office. The woman who was who had been assaulted had all the support we could possibly give her in the human resources, did not change her job in any way. What you're saying, Congressman, is just flat wrong.
All right, Congressman, would you like to respond?
Well, it was reported in the Associated Press and in the Tennessean, so I guess what Phil is saying is that they in their reporting was flat wrong.
Governor, 15 seconds.
I certainly had nothing to add to that. I know what the facts of the matter were. That woman was protected in every way we knew how.
All right, Governor. Congressman, thank you. Richard?
All right, thank you, Kristen. Candidates, let's move on to health care next. According to a recent poll by NBC News SurveyMonkey, one of the things Tennessee voters care most about is health care. Now, we know the three most popular aspects of the Affordable Care Act are coverage for pre-existing conditions, staying on your parents' health insurance until you're 26 years old, and the no lifetime cap on health care expenses. Governor Bredesen, we'll start with you. Will you support making those provisions part of a future overhaul of the ACA?
Those items are very important, and yes, the answer is certainly will support it. You know, I was not a supporter of the ACA, I'll be honest, when it came out. I believed that once it became the law of the land, it was our obligation to move forward and to support it. And it has done a number of good things. One of the most important is this protection against pre-existing conditions. Because if you have those conditions today, it is really only a major corporation's health plan or a big union plan or the Affordable Care Act that provide any protections for those. And when you do, as the congressman has done, which is to vote time and time again to repeal the Affordable Care Act without having anything to replace it, you are in effect voting to remove any ability of someone with pre-existing conditions to obtain health insurance. I think that's just wrong.
How about that, Congressman Blackburn? Those three provisions that are so important to the public, what would you do about those three in terms of any reform?
Actually, every plan that I have voted for includes pre-existing conditions, and that was a Republican provision, as was older children staying on their parents' plans. And that is something that is going to stay there. Now, we know if Phil had his way and Hillary were president, he gave her $33,400, wanted her to be president. Hillary Clinton is the mother of government-run health care. That is a concept that Phil supports. He's written a book about it in Fresh Medicine, talks about putting a 20% surcharge on your income in order to pay for it. Tennesseans do not want government-controlled health care. Tennesseans want to be able to make their health care decisions with their physicians, and that is something that I support. Giving Tennesseans that power, my goodness, we know what TennCare and what the Affordable Care Act has done to Tennessee. Today, you've got...
Governor Bredesen, you get 30 seconds for a rebuttal.
Yeah. I've heard so much about this book. If you had actually read the book, Congressman, which I suspect you haven't, in the introduction, I talk about the importance of not having the Congress and the leadership designing a health plan for this country, but instead setting up the incentives so that the sort of very muscular economic system that we have in our country and the creativity we have can solve this problem for us.
Congressman Blackburn, your turn.
Actually, Phil said that Washington Democrats knew how to solve health care And I think the private sector knows how to solve access to health care. He also said this was Barack Obama's most significant achievement. Health insurance costs in Tennessee have gone up 176% under the Affordable Care Act. So many Tennesseans have been priced out of the health insurance marketplace. We had 160,000 Tennessee families have to pay the insurance penalty last year.
As a follow-up, cost is an issue, no question.
Yes.
So, Governor Bredesen, you say you're in favor of keeping those three provisions that are so popular. How on earth would you pay for them?
Well, that is obviously the entire issue with having these is how you pay for it. The Affordable Care Act was paid for with a combination of things, of various pieces, and those I think could be used as the basis for putting together a better system that is a little more responsive. But right now we have the Affordable Care Act. We have 225,000 Tennesseans who are depending on it for their health care, and I think that sort of voting.
Okay, Congressman, just to clarify, you're for all three of those provisions, keeping those, am I correct?
These are things that have been included in bills that we have.
So how would you continue to pay for those?
One of the things that has to be done is opening up the marketplace. The Affordable Care Act is unaffordable. People cannot afford this. Open up the marketplace. A cross-state line purchase of health insurance is something that will allow individuals, families, to buy insurance that meets their needs at a price that they can afford. Now, Phil and Hillary Clinton, who he wanted to be president, would like to have government-run health care, Hillary Care.
All right, thank you. Candidates, Bob.
Thank you, Richard. Candidates, let's talk about Social Security. This is the first time in decades the Social Security program will have to dip into its own reserves to cover benefits. Also, projections from the Social Security Boards of Trustees show the trust fund will be depleted by 2034. Obviously, a fix is needed. Would you support raising the retirement age over the current cap of 67 years of age to maintain full benefits? Congressman?
Thank you so much for that. One of the things we hear from our current seniors is why in the world doesn't Congress move forward and establish Medicare and Social Security as the trust funds because of the long-term liabilities on these, making certain that we give our current seniors assurance that these are going to stay in place and that their benefits are not going to be diminished. That is something that is very important. Now, Phil supported Barack Obama and called Obamacare his significant achievement, and that took $700 billion out of the Medicare Trust Fund. This is unfair to our seniors. It is money that has come out of their paychecks. It is money that should be there for them, for their health care and for their retirement needs.
Thank you, Congressman. Governor, would you consider raising the cap?
The Social Security is a trust fund. It's the only pure trust fund we really have for any of those programs. It has begun to dip into it now, and in another 10 or 15 years, it will have done itself out. I do not support in any way, in essence, reducing the benefits by either raising the age or any of the other mechanisms for doing that. I think we should do what Ronald Reagan did during that time, which is ultimately step up to a small increase in the Social Security tax to fully fund the Social Security Trust Fund. Part of the strength of that program has always been that it is properly funded through this tax, and people can be assured of having those benefits when they're available. Medicare Part A, the trust fund, the hospital part, has problems as well, and these need to be dealt with in a host of ways, and there's a lot of ways to reduce actually the costs and the draw on that.
Thank you, Governor. Congressman, your rebuttal?
Yes. Social Security does not operate as a trust fund as it should because they write an IOU and put the money in the general fund and they spend it. Barack Obama ran our debt in this country from $10 trillion to $21 trillion. In my opinion, that is something that is absolutely immoral. Now, Phil and the Washington Democrats would take us back to those Obama-Clinton policies and continue to spend that money.
Thank you, Congressman. Governor, your rebuttal.
There is no question but that the trust fund has been invested essentially in Treasury securities. It is still a trust fund, and frankly, I think it's better to have the money in Treasury securities than it is having a huge impact, for example, of having the government own large parts of the stock market, which is what would happen if you made other kinds of purchases with it. It is a trust fund. It is segregated in that sense, and they have the most secure collateral available, which is U.S. Treasury securities. That's right.
Thank you both. Kristen?
All right, Bob, thank you. Time now to talk gun control. There has been a lot of debate about mental illness and guns. In fact, we have seen at least one incident here in Tennessee where mental health has played a part in a mass shooting after 4 people were killed at an Antioch Waffle House. So candidates, we are going to do something a little bit different with this question. We're going to give you both time to elaborate on your thoughts on this. But first, we want to get a show of hands. A show of hands, raise your hand if you are in favor of enhancing the red flag system, which identifies people with or who have suspicion of mental health issues as part of background checks for gun buyers. Okay, Governor, we're going to start with you. Both of you, I want to go on the record raising your hand. Please elaborate, Governor.
Okay. These school shootings, first of all, are unbelievably difficult for this country. I can't even imagine what it's like to be a parent of a student in that school, let alone a parent whose child had been killed or seriously injured in that fashion. I think there are some basic sound things that we can do, including enhancing background checks, properly funding NICS. But one of the most important things will be to have some mechanism to identify people who, from a mental health perspective, are not suitable for handling, owning weapons. I think that had such a thing been in place, there's 2 of these last 3 school shootings that I think could have been prevented. I think it should be judicially mandated, not something which is done by an administrator somewhere to give people protections against it being used arbitrarily. But I think one of the most effective things we could ever do to prevent these violences is to get serious about keeping guns out of the hands of people who are problematical.
Governor, thank you. Again, Congressman, you also raised your hand in support of a red flag system for background checks. Explain why.
Yes, and I will tell you, I think that we can protect the Second Amendment and also protect our citizens in public places. That is something that we've done throughout our nation's history. And I have supported enhancing the NICS system. And no one, I will tell you, nobody wants someone who is a danger to themselves or others to have a firearm in their possession. And I've been a room mother and have spent time in schools. And you want to make certain those children are safe, hardening those schools, making those resources available. I am endorsed by the Fraternal Order of Police because they know that I work carefully with them. I'm also endorsed by the NRA. I have an A rating from them. Phil and I each sought their endorsement. He has a D rating from them. Now, if you had the Democrats in control, and if Hillary Clinton, who he wanted to be president, was president, you would see them taking away your guns.
Congressman, thank you. Governor, 30 seconds for rebuttal.
I want to just reaffirm again, please, that I have been a gun owner all of my life. I grew up in a rural community. I have been a strong supporter of Second Amendment rights. I think those are important rights of American citizens. And I think the way we exercise those rights responsibly, as with anything else, is by putting reasonable kinds of controls in place. I got crossways with the NRA because I vetoed a bill that allowed people to carry guns in bars. I thought that was crazy. It was stupid. I vetoed the bill, and it made them very mad.
Governor, thank you. Congressman?
Yes, Phil was in New York last night with Michael Bloomberg, Michael Bloomberg is one of the leading advocates for gun control in this country. I fully believe we can protect the Second Amendment and we can protect guns. Your right to own a gun. You know, the Democrats bring you judges and justices like Sonia Sotomayor, who says she does not think you have a fundamental right to own a gun.
Congressman, thank you. Richard?
Let's have one more question related to the Second Amendment. Just last week, President Trump announced a ban on bump stocks is coming. In fact, during a news conference at the White House, he said, "We are knocking out bump stocks. I have told the National Rifle Association bump stocks are gone." Bump stocks, of course, allow semi-automatic weapons to operate like a fully automatic gun, but some gun advocates oppose the president on this issue. Under any conditions, Congressman Blackburn, you first on this one, would you consider restricting or banning military assault-style weapons or any device that could modify firearms in this way?
Thank you for that. And I will tell you, this is something that the House has already done. And of course, one of the reasons I'm running for the Senate is because the place is dysfunctional and they don't get around to taking up some of the things that are there that they ought to be taking up. Dealing with bump stocks is a great example of that. You know, hearts were just absolutely broken with what happened in Las Vegas. And you had the Nashville community, the music community, very affected by that. But if you had the Democrats and the Washington Democrats in control, they will tell you one of the things that they want to do is to diminish your Second Amendment rights. That is not what Tennesseans want. Now, Phil would be there, right there with the Washington Democrats, and he was at Michael Bloomberg's last night. That is a focus of gun control. Tennesseans want to make certain that we do this the right way.
Governor Bredesen, your turn. Under any conditions, would you consider banning military assault-style weapons or devices that can turn them into that?
Well, first of all, the bump stocks turn weapons into something I think which is more effective, more dangerous than a straight military-style weapon, because it involves a much more rapid kind of fire than you can get with one of these assault rifles. I absolutely believe the bump stocks ought to be banned. It's a good example of reasonable restrictions that help keep and protect our Second Amendment rights. I think the cat is out of the bag, as it were, with the assault weapons. There are somewhere between 10 and 20 million of them in the country today, and absent, with that as a fact, I just can't see where that could ever possibly be practical. I also know an awful lot of people who enjoy owning them, enjoy using them for hunting, and I think do not represent any danger to anyone. I just want to reaffirm one more time that I strongly support the right of any citizen to own weapons subject to reasonable restrictions like we've described.
Congressman, you get 30 seconds for a rebuttal.
One of the things we want to do, as I said, is make certain that we protect the Second Amendment. This is what Tennesseans continue to say to me. Let's protect people in our public spaces. Let's make certain that we harden our schools, that we use new technologies on those schools, but that we protect the Second Amendment. And I am, again, endorsed by the NRA, have an A rating from the NRA, and look forward to continuing to work with the Fraternal Order of Police on public safety.
Final say, 30 seconds in your rebuttal, Governor.
Simply to say again that I really believe that there are a lot of Americans who, from all different parts of the political spectrum, this is not a Democratic Republican issue or a liberal conservative issue, who enjoy and treasure the right to own arms, understand that there should be reasonable restrictions on things like bump stocks and the stuff we've talked about before with mental health. To me, that is a sound place to do. I do not think this is a partisan issue.
All right, thank you, candidates. We're almost halfway through what will be the last debate between the two of you. Katina?
All right, Richard, thank you so much. You are watching the Tennessee Senate debate, and we are broadcasting live all across the state of Tennessee. A reminder here to follow the hashtag #TNSenateDebate. There you will get background information on the candidates as well as some live updates. We are back in a moment with more questions for the candidates. Welcome back to the Tennessee Senate debate. We are broadcasting live from the Baker Center on the campus of the University of Tennessee in Knoxville. And I'm Katina Rankin, the evening anchor for WATN in Memphis. Listen, I want to remind you to follow that hashtag TN Senate Debate, because there you can get live updates on each of the questions that we are about to ask. As a matter of fact, let's head straight to Christian, who is up next.
All right, Katina, thank you so much. We're going to start this next half hour with a question about immigration. The president implemented a zero-tolerance policy for border security as a way to reduce the number of illegal immigrants coming into the United States. The policy included family separations. In fact, we know right now several hundred children remain separated from their parents. So do you believe this was an effective tool to discourage illegal immigrants from coming into the United States? Governor, we begin with you.
Sure. No, I do not believe it was an effective tool, and whatever its effectiveness might or might not have been, I think it amounted to child abuse. I think it was a stain on our country's reputation. It's the sort of thing that's going to be studied in future years by school students as an inappropriate period of American history. I hope we can reunite those children as rapidly as possible. I want to say, I believe very strongly in controlling our borders. There's no question about that. When I was governor, we were one of the first states to send National Guard troops down to the Arizona border to help in that process. But I think there are much better ways of doing it than building a wall. In today's world, with the technology we have, we could do that more effectively and more quickly and less expensively with that. I just think the wall is sort of political theater. But we do need to control our borders. There's no question about it. And it's something that we ought to be able to do together in a bipartisan fashion.
All right, Governor, thank you. Congressman, do you believe this was an effective tool to discourage illegal immigrants from coming into our country?
Kristen, no one wants to see families separated. And actually, this is an issue that I raised in 2014 when I visited some of these facilities and brought to the attention the problems with the DACA program and the problems with some of these families. Now, I tell you where a zero-tolerance policy is working. We have found that there are fewer drugs coming across that southern border. This is news that was released today. We know that if Phil had his way and Hillary was president, he wanted her to be president. He gave her $33,400. And the Democrats have advocated for open borders, for abolishing ICE. We need to secure that border. He thinks that building the wall is political theater. Let me tell you something. Tennesseans want to see that wall built because open border policies have made every town a border town and every state a border state. Certainly in Tennessee, we see.
Congressman, thank you. Governor, 30 seconds to respond.
See, Congressman, you seem to have a crystal ball about talking all the time about what I'm going to do when I'm a U.S. Senator. I'm going to act when I'm a senator exactly the same way I did when I was a governor, which is independently. I was an equal opportunity offender of both parties in Washington. I think we need some of that independence, just looking at issues individually and trying to decide what the best solution is, and stop with all this ideological stuff and trying to set people against each other on these kinds of issues. It's time to get beyond that in this country, and immigration is a perfect example.
Governor, thank you. Congressman, response?
Yes, we know that what the Democrats have tried to do is push to abolish ICE. We know that these open border policies are something that have allowed MS-13 gangs into our communities. They make our communities less safe. Sex trafficking, human trafficking, drug trafficking. And this is something that Washington Democrats have pushed, a policy that they have pushed. Abolish ICE. Open up the borders.
Congressman, thank you. We do have a follow-up here. Governor, we want to begin with you. You call the wall political theater. There's one estimate out there saying that to build an actual physical wall would cost nearly $70 billion. What would you like to see us do if we had $70 billion to have treating border security?
Well, I think first of all, I think that's a huge amount of money to spend on anything like that. The wall strikes me as something sort of out of the last century that you would think of doing. We have now electronic surveillance, we have drones, we have all sorts of electronic sensors. You still are going to have troops and ICE members who are close by where these border crossings happen, whether or not there is a wall there. I would put the money into much more sophisticated kinds of electronic, more modern technology.
Governor, thank you. Congressman, are you willing to spend that estimated $70 billion on a physical wall?
Walls work. Just ask Israel. And when you look at the impact on our nation of an open border and drug trafficking, sex trafficking, human trafficking, you know it is imperative that we protect this country and that we secure that southern border. It is not political theater to talk about building a wall and protecting this nation. Now, when Phil was governor, he gave driving certificates to 51,000 illegal aliens, made our state a haven.
So, Congressman, are you willing to spend $70 billion for that wall?
If the wall ends up costing $70 billion, what Tennesseans say is build the wall and secure our country because of the impact. Let me give you a great example of this. I was visiting with an angel mom.
Congressman,
Cindy.
I'm sorry, you're out of time. We need to go ahead and move on.
Okay.
Richard?
All right, this next question is about the man both of you want to replace in the U.S. Senate, Bob Corker. I want to ask you to grade Bob Corker on his performance in the last 12 years as senator. Here's a look at our scale. It's a pretty obvious one. A is excellent, B above average, C average, D below average, F failure. We'll let you each elaborate, but we want to get your grade first. Congressman Blackburn, what grade would you give Senator Corker?
I would give Senator Corker an A.
Okay, and Governor Bredesen, what grade would you give?
Actually, I'd give him an A, too. He's a different party. I'd give him an A, though.
All right, Congressman, back to you. Explain why you would give Senator Corker the grade you did.
I have enjoyed working with Senator Corker on different issues. One of those that we are working on this week is the issue of sex trafficking and human trafficking, and I'll be working with him on this issue Friday in Memphis. This is something that has so affected our communities and our states. Indeed, the TBI conducted the largest sex trafficking sting that has been conducted. 22 people arrested in that sting. This is something that so affects our young women. And when you hear the stories of how these traffickers prey on children that are in foster care, this is absolutely heartbreaking. And I know that Senator Corker has worked hard on this issue. I appreciate that he has been diligent on this issue. I also know that it...
Okay, Governor Bredesen, you also gave the senator an A. Why did you give that score?
Yeah, I'd say, the senator is obviously of a different party, and there are certainly issues on which we have a different take. What I admired about him in the job was he was somebody who did his homework. I mean, a lot of senators go out and party in the evening and have lobbyists take them to dinner. And Bob Corker was somebody who always, I think, kind of went back and sat down and tried to figure out the answers to things and became expert. So I always thought his views on things, whether or not I agreed with every one of them, were really thoughtful and well thought out, and that he provided a useful perspective. I had a lot of interaction with him during the time I was governor on economic development kinds of issues. When we were working at recruiting Volkswagen, for example, to come to the state, he was enormously helpful in that, and really played a huge role in doing that. It's something that I feel like I know a lot about and would very much like to do as a senator myself with Senator Alexander and whoever is governor, because that effectiveness of having people from both parties working together really works.
Congressman Blackburn, you gave that grade of an A despite criticism of the president, I should say, that the senator has engaged in that you likely would disagree with, including on the issue of tariffs. And many felt that he gave less than a full endorsement of you.
I have enjoyed working with Senator Corker, and I'm running hard to make certain that I keep Senator Corker's desk on the Republican side of the aisle. I think that that is important to do, and Senator Alexander tells a great story about making certain that that desk that he and Senator Frist have sat in stays on the Republican side of the aisle. We don't want it to go over there with the Washington Democrats. And of course, that is where it would go. Phil would pick that desk up, and it would be somewhere between Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren.
All right. Well, Governor Bredesen, for you, after the primary, Senator Corker said of you, he is a friend, he was a very good mayor, very good governor, and very good business person. That comment drew a lot of attention at the time, and some might think that your good grade is just payback for him not campaigning against you all that hard.
No, I think I would have said the same thing before. I've known him for a long time. As I say, I don't agree on every single issue with him. I think he was a good senator for our state. I think that he's, especially in the area of foreign relations, where he has studied so hard and became so important, has performed a real service for the country. And that would be my grade.
All right. Thank you, Senator. Bob?
Thank you, Richard. Candidate, as you well know, our country is very divided politically. Some call it tribal, two sides, no middle. We see it in vicious political campaign ads. We saw it in the Kavanaugh hearings. We see it here. Congressman, your opponents say you will never oppose Donald Trump on anything. Governor, your opponents say you'll never oppose Chuck Schumer on anything. Voters don't like it. Nothing gets done. Why do you believe this has become the atmosphere during this election cycle, and how do you change it? Governor?
It has become the standard, and I'm very sad to see that. We have in our country, especially when we've dealt with the big things, just done them on a bipartisan basis. Social Security was bipartisan, Medicare was bipartisan, the Civil Rights Act was bipartisan. I think we need to get back to that, especially in dealing with some of these big issues. We've been talking up here about immigration just before this. It is a huge issue which has been developing for 30 or 40 years in this country. There are 10 or 11 million undocumented immigrants in our country that we're obviously not going to all send away. I think we got to stop making this into a tribal issue where you're setting Democrats against Republicans and settle down and use that spirit of bipartisanship to try to find some solution to it. This is a big issue we are going to have to tackle as this country in the course of the next few years.
Thank you, Governor. Congressman, why do you think we are where we are politically?
It is something that is of concern to all of us. And of course, I think when you look at the Senate and the brokenness of the Senate not getting things done, it is a concern. I've been recognized as a bipartisan leader in Congress for getting things done, pushing forward ideas that have bipartisan support. Now, we know Phil wanted Hillary to be president. She called us all deplorables. He gave her $33,400. Yesterday, she said, you can't be civil with the party that opposes your ideas. You had former AG holders say when they're down, kick them. You had one of our colleagues at a prayer breakfast for Phil say, he wished Marsha would go jump off the bridge. And this is the kind of rhetoric that is not helpful. It is important to keep campaigns focused on issues, to focus on things that people have done while they are in office, and then to draw that contrast.
Thank you. Congressman, Governor, your rebuttal.
The way in which we're going to find some way beyond this tribalism, I think, is going to be to find at least a few issues to start working on together where there's some possibility of finding common ground. One I would mention that seems to me obvious is DACA, where vast majorities of Americans want that problem solved, these young people who are here through no fault of their own. I'd love to see both parties get out of this business of trying to attach things to that and make it into a tribal issue.
Thank you, Governor. Congressman?
Yes, I think that finding a way forward is about leadership. And this is a great opportunity to show how to lead and work together. That is something that I have a solid record of doing, whether it is in telecommunications policy, whether it is working on issues such as DACA. The only bill that's passed in the House is my legislation. It has passed twice. But we know.
Thank you, Congressman. Thank you both. Kristen?
Bob, thank you. President Donald Trump has proposed creating another branch of the military called the Space Force. It is estimated to cost $13 billion in the first 5 years. Congressman, do you support spending the money on this?
Establishing Space Force is something whose time has come. When you look at the utilization of all of the new technologies that are out there, you look at Fort Campbell, which is here in our state, and how they have been a leader in this component. You look at our National Guard unit, that is the 118th, that is in Nashville, that has a cyber and intel unit, and absolutely this is something where we have the opportunity to bring part of this to our state. I mean, you know, part of it's going to be in Texas. We've got the opportunity to bring some of it here, and we should. When you talk about 21st century warfare and you talk to our men and women in uniform at Fort Campbell, they will tell you so much of our fighting will be done in the virtual space. The utilization of drones.
Congressman, thank you. Governor, do you support spending this kind of money on a Space Force?
Let me say, so I'll certainly answer that, but let me say, first of all, just how important I think a strong military really is to our country. We have played a major role in our world ever since World War II in a host of areas, which is supported in large part by the sort of enormous success and strength of our military. And I want to do anything I possibly can to help support that. I would want to know a lot more about the Space Force before I signed on to that idea, and in particular, what it does that the Air Force would not be an appropriate place to do. Anytime you start another branch of the service like that, there's going to be a whole array of overhead and other stuff that goes with it. The possibilities of less coordination. I certainly wouldn't want the Space Force fighting with the Air Force about who gets resources to do various kinds of things. So I've got an open mind, but I'd sure want to know a lot more about it before I signed on to it.
Governor, thank you. Congressman, 30-second rebuttal.
Yes, if Hillary Clinton were president and Phil wanted her to be president, gave her $33,400, we would have a weaker military. And under the Obama administration, what you had was cutting the troops, cutting their funding, putting the cash on pallets, sending it to people that do not wish us well, and just taking money out of the military that they needed to go do their mission. And that's what you would have had.
Congressman, thank you. Governor, your response?
Well, let's just say I'm not really proposing or running a campaign based on putting cash on pallets and sending it off to our enemies. I actually think this is a serious subject, our military strength, and I'm very open to the idea of changing things, but I want to do it very carefully. We have a successful military. It is the strongest in the world. Let's not mess around until we know what we're doing.
All right, thank you. Bob.
Thank you, Kristen. Just today, Ford announced it would be cutting its workforce by as much as 12%, due in part to the tariffs on steel. Here in Tennessee, all of the statewide elected Republican officials have criticized the Trump tariffs on steel and soybeans, saying they are hurting Tennessee businesses and workers and Tennessee farmers. While in Tennessee last week for you, Congressman, President Trump unveiled his new NAFTA plan called USMCA. This is designed to help Tennessee dairy farmers and automotive workers. Congress, though, still needs to vote on this. Do you support this idea? Does it do enough to offset the harm that the tariffs are doing? Does it do enough for Tennesseans? Governor Bredesen?
I certainly support it. I think it is more of a rebranded NAFTA than anything significantly different, but it does advance the issue somewhat. The important thing, though, is that it does not address in any way the steel and aluminum tariffs. They are vastly more influential on the economy of our state than the dairy and other things are. We have spent 30 plus years, starting with Lamar Alexander, building up a strong automotive industry with a lot of employment here in our state. And these really are threatening that industry. When you hear from industry leaders in this state and the automotive industry, they are scared to death of what this is going to do to that long-term investment here in our state. The other concern I've got about the changes to NAFTA is that we got some benefit, but boy, we sure burned a lot of bridges and caused a lot of hard feelings and a lot of mistrust. This is not a real estate deal where people walk away.
Thank you, Governor. Congressman, you said you're not a fan of these tariffs. Do you need to be stronger?
Well, I am not a fan of tariffs, never had been. I'm for free and fair trade. And when you talk to our farmers here, they will tell you that they want trade, not aid. And I've spent a lot of time advocating for our manufacturers, our producers, and our farmers. Now with the USMCA, what you've got is a lot of those in our auto parts, auto manufacturing, and our aftermarket auto parts industries are very hopeful for this. I tell you who else likes this is our dairy farmers. Now, what they didn't like was the trade policies from Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton that brought about some of these provisions that did not serve them well, that cut off markets instead of expanding markets. And our farmers want to make certain that they have bilateral trade agreements. That's where they would like to see us go. So would many of our producers. They are hopeful that you're going to see a European agreement soon, an EU agreement.
Thank you, Congressman. Governor, on your rebuttal, does more need to be done for these tariffs that are hurting Tennessee businesses and workers?
Yes, I really believe that these tariffs are, in essence, a job-killing tax on Tennessee businesses. We have issues with China, for example, intellectual property and difficulties of doing business. They need to be dealt with one-on-one through those and not through these broad actions like putting these tariffs in place. This economic impact that these are having, it's starting to hit in some places like.
Thank you, Governor. Congressman, you get the final word on this issue.
Yes. China has had a trade war on us for decades, and we know that. And if we're in this trade war, we better be sure that we win this trade war. And I am so pleased that we've got China at the table talking, because we need to bring those jobs back. Look what happened under Bill Clinton with NAFTA. Tennesseans saw thousands of jobs leave this state, and now we need to bring them back under the policies of Hillary Clinton.
Thank you, Congressman.
Yes.
Thank you, Governor. Richard?
All right, final question for you both, and hopefully it's an easy one for you. We all know the polls are tight in this race, but the bottom line is, come November 6th, only one of you on this stage is going to be senator-elect. We want to first get a yes or no response from each of you, and then I'm going to allow you to elaborate. Yes or no, will Tennessee be in good hands if your opponent is elected to the U.S. Senate? Congressman, yes or no?
I think it would be in better hands with me.
All right, I will take that as a maybe. I don't know. And Governor, your response.
I think a part of what we have to do in this is to accept the outcomes of elections, so I would say yes, that we'll be fine.
Okay, explain why you gave the answer you did, Congressman.
And Tennesseans want to make certain that they're going to have somebody who is going to be there to take their Tennessee values to Washington, D.C. Phil has told us he's running to end the dry spell for Democrats in Tennessee. And he had wanted Hillary Clinton to be president. She called us deplorable. He told us, go roll up your sleeves, go to work for her. Gave her $33,400. That is not the agenda that people want. They don't want Democrats in control of the Senate. They don't want Dianne Feinstein running judiciary. They don't want Bernie Sanders running the Budget Committee. They don't want Elizabeth Warren running the Senate Finance Committee. They don't want Senator Lamar Alexander to give his chairmanship up and give it over to Patty Murray, who is the nation's leading advocate for government-run single-payer health care. Tennesseans want somebody who is going to work hard to make certain that Donald Trump's agenda gets done, because they voted for that agenda.
Governor Bredesen, why did you give the answer you gave?
Well, first of all, Congressman, I did not think you could possibly beat the number of mentions you made of Chuck Schumer in our last debate, but I believe you have with Hillary Clinton here tonight. Let me say, I've talked during this campaign about the need to stop the tribalism and come together. And I guess the logical extension of that is you have a campaign like this, and it's hard fought, and there's hard feelings and so on. But when it's over, it needs to be over. That's why I said that. If it turns out that my opponent wins this election, which I don't think is going to happen, but certainly might, I think it's important then for all Tennesseans, Democrats and Republicans, to sort of gather around and support and try to help her be the best senator she possibly can be.
All right, thank you. Bob.
Thank you, candidates. We appreciate it very much. That concludes our questions, and we appreciate your answers. Now you get 30 seconds each for a closing statement. Governor Bredesen, you go first.
I do think this is a very simple election. If you like Washington the way it is today and the partisanship and the lines in the sand, I'm not your guy. You've got somebody who's got a lot of experience, 16 years of it, and is good at it. If you want to start moving things forward and changing things and bringing some fresh air into the place, get some things done, I think that's my record. I'd be proud to represent Tennessee once again. You've heard me say that I'm applying for the job, and I want to tell you right now, I'm ready for it.
Thank you, Governor. Congressman?
You've seen two very different visions of how Tennesseans would be represented tonight. I'm going to take Tennessee values to Washington, D.C. to represent you. Phil will support the Clinton agenda, the Washington Democrats. I'm going to be there to make certain that I get judges right every time, because I will. I'm going to support your Second Amendment. I am going to make certain that our borders are secure. I'm going to support making certain you keep your tax cuts.
Congressman Blackburn, Governor Bredesen, thank you again very much.
Thank
Kristen?
you.
Okay, everyone, that concludes tonight's debate. On behalf of Richard Ransom, Bob Mueller, I'm Kristen Farley. Thanks for joining us, and have a good night.
With Election Day less than a month away and the